The first few days of a new year, and life after the previous week's festivities is returning to some semblance of normality. In spite of every child's wish, still no snow to the streets and houses of the village. But the first of the snowdrops have bloomed, and they lift sober hearts a little with the earliest suggestion of a forthcoming spring. The water on the village pond is still yet to see ice, and one of its wilder winter residents is so well fed and content that he feels none of the urgency that we so often associate with this season. There are small signs to the beak and plumage of this grey heron that the courtship season isn't so far away, but right now, on this early January morning, he seemingly has time to conserve energy and ponder at the life around him. When actually hunting, our grey heron is magnificently equipped, with a long, muscular, spring-loaded neck, a dagger-like bill, but probably its most powerful advantage, an incredible eyesight. His eyesight is up to 300% more detailed than ours, and comes with both side and forward-facing options, and it's this binocular vision that gives him great depth perception. He also has a built-in zoom lens, which incredibly allows him to switch instantaneously between telescopic and macro vision. It's probably as good or even better than our fanciest modern camera lenses. To top it all off, there's even a suggestion that this heron has a polarising element to what he sees, and therefore vastly reducing any reflection on the water's surface. Into the second week of January, and for central England, the first snow. Nowhere heavy and not likely to persist, but it does qualify for the first of the winter feed to leave the burgeoning hay stores. Heavily pregnant ewes, needing all the nutrients they can get. On outlying sunwood fields, one of our more recognisable winter migrants is foraging. The fieldfare. Fieldfares are large, muscular members of the thrush family, and they steadily arrive from Scandinavia, Finland and northwest Russia from about October onwards. But they are by no means alone in this migration. In fact, millions of birds across many species head south from their northern breeding grounds. Some, though, are a little less conspicuous, and spilt grain outside a large farmyard outhouse attracts a flock of the very familiar chaffinch. But these too could be from northern climes. And that suspicion can only be bolstered further by the appearance of this bird, the Brambling. Bramblings are close relatives of chaffinches, and they can arrive in Britain in numbers of anywhere between 50,000 to 2 million. This all dependent on the abundance of the winter food back in their northern European territories. But they come safe in the knowledge that even the coldest, harshest weather here in the UK would likely still be a vast improvement to the far north. By late April, the last of the Bramblings will leave our shores, back to their Baltic breeding grounds. And most probably, the greater majority of these chaffinches too. A few days later, and the snow now a distant memory. Bright, misty starts lead consistently to overcast, mild days. Grounded buzzards become an increasingly common sight on open pasture and furrowed field. These moderately sized birds of prey are without the thermals to soar upon, leaving the local rabbit population safe for a time. But they must compensate their diet with whatever meagre morsels the soil can provide. Things like leather jackets and worms. Not being necessarily designed for such foraging is always worth, if you can, seeking assistance in the matter. And this particular buzzard has learned to do just that. Getting comfortable, they sit patiently whilst the local flock of ewes graze the field below. Only when the flock moves on and 10 sets of cloven hooves have worked their magic will the buzzard take to the ground. Ruminant worm charming has convinced hundreds of annelids to surface, probably in an attempt to escape drowning by what their instinct has told them was rain, or maybe the rumbling approach of a hungry mole. But either way, it saves a lot of time and effort for this clever buzzard. Nearing the middle of January, and the weather has taken a considerable turn, but not in a way we'd expect. Record temperatures are being set all over the country, with 18 degrees Celsius, 64 degrees Fahrenheit, reminiscent of averages found in March and April. For the country's population of brown hare, this can only elevate the early tensions of the breeding season. Amorous males much more alert. And unprepared and unwilling females at their resilient best. There is one other inhabitant of the hare's field that's also feeling the heat. The skylark. This, some would say, unremarkable looking bird has firmly set out its position in our cultural heritage, mostly because of the male's protracted song, usually delivered in an ascending flight, and sometimes to a great altitude, all as a signal of fitness to prospective female mates, together with determining territories and breeding boundaries. But this unseasonable January heat has left this male skylark with a quandary: to continue foraging in haste as the calendar dictates, but now also to sing, as the weather suggests. The fair and warm January weather continues for a few more days, and so it would seem appropriate for a trip to the beach. Sunrise on the long, flat and dune-filled plains of our eastern coastline. tracks of a long-gone fox that's been negotiating the marab grass overnight, possibly for roosting bird or moonlit feeding rabbit. As the morning progresses, his tracks are replaced by ours and our pets as people flock to take advantage of the winter warmth. Wary oyster catchers, having more potential threats to acknowledge than they would otherwise normally expect. This then, the last place you might expect a flurry of snow, though it appears a few people have. This is snow of the avian variety, snow buntings.
Just over the road. You got them? Just behind those two roads.
Much like the Bramblings, these buntings often represent the arrival of winter to people living as here in their southern migration zone, but are looked at as harbingers of spring by those people living within that Arctic breeding range. Flocks of the brighter white males and more colourful females scour our eastern coastline in small numbers for seeds and insects. Presently, back in their breeding zone, they would have nearly 24 hours of darkness and temperatures that mean they simply wouldn't survive. But with the present climate here being so temperate, it would appear that these are the nearest deliverance of snow that we might see. Behind the shoreline, beyond the stands of pine, a more visceral proclamation of winter is occurring. The arrival of 10,000 pink-footed geese. This skein is probably just 10% of the wintering UK population, all of which have travelled from Spitsbergen, Iceland and Greenland to feed on grass, winter beet and potatoes. Though as dramatic as the displays of numbers and noise is, something possibly more incredible has broken cover onto the pasture. A winter covey of grey partridge. Unlike their long-distance travelling neighbours, small and large, the native grey partridge rarely moves more than 1 kilometre from its birthplace. A natural treasure, reminiscent of our ancient farmland, and yet now declining so badly that probably most of you will never see one in your lifetime. The end of January, and temperatures are finally that of which we and our wildlife would expect. That said, it still remains much more reasonable than those found in Iceland, which is why their breeding hooper swans can be found relocating to our eastern washes at this time of the year. The hard pack ice relents under the sheer numbers of these beautiful, honking, yellow-billed swans. A small part of winter Britain where our resident mew swans can meet their Icelandic cousins and their families. Out on the surrounding flood meadows, now free of ice from the warming sun, The trumpets of the Icelandic hooper-swans are replaced by the kazoo-like calls of Icelandic widgeon. These small and beautifully formed dabbling ducks gracefully graze the meadows, the males with chestnut head, yellow forehead and pink breast, and the females in their maternal earthy colour. They seem to find all they need from a diet of vegetation, and this can be thirsty work. But for some winter visiting dabbling ducks, this is not enough. These are teal, and they're on a mission. A pioneering group from a larger wintering raft out on the river has decided to take a tributary leading into dense woodland. Teal will eat aquatic plants and seed, but they also have a need for animal matter and the protein that provides. These Siberian visitors have found it hard to locate any invertebrate food over the winter months, but this tributary and the woodland pool it leads to, they seemingly know, might hold the key. Low, graduating edges leading up to the woodland floor and thick with dead and decaying leaf mulch is starting to provide results. The further the group move down the tributary, the more Daphnia, or small freshwater crustaceans, they find. But this comes at a cost, an incredible risk of predation. The more they progress, the deeper and darker the mulch and the higher the concentration of the freshwater plankton, but also the more dense and tangled the roots and branches all about them. High on their protein fix, they seem to forgo all sense of potential danger as they reach even further into the arboreal cage they've entered, firmly gripped in a feeding frenzy. The risks from above and at ground level are ever present. Duck is high on the fox's list of potential prey, but it's up in the woodland canopy where eyes are watching. The teal's preferred method of predator evasion, flight, is now simply not an option. female sparrowhawk calls. Clarity suddenly prevails for our teal, and their exit back to the open water is swift. Luckily, our sparrowhawk has just fed, and she's courtship calling to her mate. The teal head back to the river, bellies full of protein, but the risks have been high, and next time could prove fatal. February, Ash Wednesday, the starting gun for a countdown to spring, and the coldest night of the winter yet. With mercury dropping to -7, nothing has escaped. For small birds like the long-tailed tit, the fight for survival has just got considerably harder. But the woodland floor harbours a bird who's an expert at finding food, especially when the odds are stacked against him. The ultimate forager, the blackbird. A familiar sight across gardens and parks nationwide, the blackbird is actually a true woodland species whose whole raison d'etre is hunting down ground-based invertebrates, and surely there is no better. With an intensity and vigour from its powerful body, he cuts a trench into the leaf litter, almost as high as himself. He knows if he can quickly access the low elements, he's likely to find woodlice, millipede, spiders, and other creatures negotiating the insulating leafy blanket. More often, and especially on colder mornings, his physical exertions attract the attention of another woodland bird, the robin. Robins have always had an affinity for hanging around any creature that disturbs or tills the ground, for here lies the chance of an opportune snack. This is mutually beneficial for both birds. As with the blackbird's apparent successful technique, there also comes a vastly increased risk of predation. Burying your head into piles of leaves means being increasingly prone to attack. Another pair of eyes, then, can provide a vital early warning. This remains, though, a high-risk strategy of finding food, and it should come as no surprise that for both female sparrowhawk and goshawk, the blackbird is the most often predated species. We will often find ourselves questioning the noisy rustle under a hedge or in the dark recesses of our gardens, and though most of us will leave with our curiosity unsated, it probably can be confidently said that we've heard a blackbird. Thankfully, other than the robin, the only attention our blackbird is rousing right now is that of an envious jay. days are steadily lengthening, and the raised intensity of light and warmth, though incrementally small, has sparked into life one of the woodland's most iconic and infamous battles. Despite the roar of nearby rush hour traffic and railway line, another acoustic spectacle is playing out. Great spotted woodpeckers are well equipped to deal with the hammering blows required to claim their territories in winter. And within this prized coppice woodland, there are at least 3 competitors. Carefully selected for resonance, these male woodpeckers will have determined which trunk or bough will provide the most desired drumming pitch. Like an audible game of tennis, the quality of your delivery is representative of your strength and virility. This a very much celebrated late winter spectacle. It appears these woodpeckers are seemingly hammering away a whole season. And we can be sure that before scores have finally settled, spring will have finally sprung.